Today, I'd like to go over something that or a class that we used in the past, and it was in Chapter 6. We called the class Credit Card. And just like in the book, they used the example of making a new bank account using the old bank account class in the book. We're going to use the credit card class to make multiple credit cards in an array. But we had to make some changes to the credit card class that imported into the project to make it work with what we're trying to do. First change is we changed that the constructor to only set the card balance at 0. So you're starting at 0 card balance. But the user is going to input what the card balance is going to be in the main method, right? Second change is we reduce the actually the second change is that we added a new method named setStart, which will allow the user to create or at least set what the card balance should be. And then the last change is we changed the show balance method from returning a string to returning a double, and all it's doing is showing what the current balance is by returning card balance out of the object, out of the class, right? And so that leads us to actually writing the code to create a array of an object. Now we've used array of objects before. You have seen the creation of a array of strings in your book, which is nothing special. It's literally just declaring a string of array of strings, right? And you can use different methods, different string class methods on that string. And all you have to do is call the array element that's a string, and then act on that array element using that method. You do the same with objects that you've created on your own, and we'll get to that. So first things first, let's go ahead and declare the object. So we'll go ahead and set a constant integer, and we'll say card count. That's keeping track of how many cards you have. We'll say you have 3 cards, right? And then we'll create an instance of the credit card objects, right? But it's an array, so we use the brackets. We call it just like if we call the integer array, we put int and then brackets, put credit card, then brackets, right? Then we'll name what the reference variable will be. We'll call the reference variable cards, and we'll set that equal to a new object, credit cards, and then we'll set the capacity of the credit card array to 3. So card count. So now here we've initialized the array, and we obviously need to import stuff from the user. So we have to import the scanner class. So java.util scanner, and we're going to go ahead and create a instance of the scanner class. And we'll call it keyboard, just like it does always in your book. And so we initialized that as well. So here's the meat and potatoes of what we're doing today. We want to create 2 for loops. We want to create one for loop that asks the user how much is owed on their credit card, or on each credit card account. And then we want to then we want to create a second loop that displays the contents of each loop or each element of the array of objects that are the credit card account objects, right? So let's start with the first loop, and they'll both will be traditional loops, and I'll get to why that's the case, especially with the second one. So in the first loop, we'll type in the keyword for, we'll create an index variable, we'll call it index, we'll set that equal to 0, and then we'll say index, while index is less than the length of the cards array, and we want to increment index each time the loop runs. We'll say cards. We want to access the element of that the index is on. So on the first loop, it'll access the 0th index item, so card sub 0, and we'll assign it. We'll assign it a new credit card object, and what we'll do with that new object is we'll ask the user to do print line, and we'll ask the user how much is owed on the card. And to do that, we'll say index plus 1, because remember, it's only if we're on the first iteration, we haven't incremented the index variable yet, so we need to say card, how much is owed on card 1 will be index plus 1, and then we'll say card. So what we'll say is how much is owed on card 1 on one card, or we have to swap these. On card 1. And then here we'll assign the index, or we'll assign the card object a value, and we'll set start. We'll set the balance, and that will be equal to, the next keyboard dot next line, since set start accepts a string and then converts it into a double and sets that equal to card balance. And so that's it for the first loop. So we're on the first loop, we're simply assigning each element of the array a value, and each card object will be assigned a value, or elements with the data field within the instance of the card object will be assigned a value. And on the second loop, we want to go through the entire array and tell the user what the contents of that of the balance, what's the balance on all those cards. So you would figure, okay, Professor Rab, it's probably more efficient to use an enhanced for loop to access each one of these variables, since we have to iterate through all of the objects in the array. And to that, I would say yes, but then we want to do something quirky and say, you know, the card balance, the card one's balance is X, Y, and Z, right? That's not going to, and somehow we have to say card one or what have you. So, only way you can do that is by having an index variable, and the only practical way to have an index variable is to have it already iterating with the loop, and you can't have that with an enhanced for loop. So with that, let's go ahead and make a traditional for loop. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that, and we'll set the integer index variable, just call it I, and set that equal to 0, and while I is less than the length of the array, and we want to increment I once every loop, and we'll say system out, and we'll do a format specifier, and we'll say card, and we'll just use the integer. So the flag is percent, remember, and the format specifier is X for an integer, and then the card whatever balance is the $. That means nothing to the compiler, but then you put the flag there. That means something. You want it to have 2 levels of precision as a float. And we'll put a new line to separate each line. And the first element will be the index, right? So I plus 1. Just like in the first for loop, we have to do plus 1 because it's always the card number is always 1 in addition to whatever the index might be. And then the next element will be the cards object, whatever the index number is, and then we'll operate on that index, that particular object within that array, and we'll use a show balance method. And what we're doing here is using this show balance method to return a double value, which is the card balance that the user just inputted, and it will show and fill in this format specifier. All right. So let's go ahead and run this program. All right. So how much is on card 1? We'll say $1,000. How much is on card 2? We'll say another $2,000. And on card 3, we'll say $2,500 balance, right? And all it does, it will repeat back to me. Card 1 has $1,000. Card 2 has $2,000. Card 3 has $2,500 on it. And that's the beauty of arrays. You can create an array of objects to explain or to store data, to manipulate data, and to use methods to manipulate the data stored in the data field of that instance of that object. Now, in the next lesson, we're going to take this concept of an array one step further and say we can have multiple dimensions of arrays, and we'll explain the utility of that. We'll start off with 2 dimensions, and then see what the utility is of a 3-dimensional or even a 4-dimensional array.